You've heard a lot of my testimony, I guess. Probably some of you haven't, but I'm not going to retell it again about the sexual abuse from my dad. But it was long time, lots of years, not an occasional thing, all the time. It was an awful mess. And so I was pretty broken by the time I left home. And I like to tell this because I think a lot of people do this. I thought when I left home that the problem was over. I thought I left the problem, but the thing was I took it with me in my soul. I got away from being abused anymore, but I still had the mess inside of me. And I looked okay on the outside, but boy, was I messed up inside. And there's so many people, even in the church, like that, because a lot of people turn to God because they are hurting. And then we just kind of get together in our churches and just hurt each other. And, we need to learn to let people heal and to let people be honest and to let people talk without judging them and to not tell their secrets, to be able to listen to what somebody says and not go blabbing it everywhere. Amen? We need to be able to trust people. But so I left home and I married the first guy that showed any interest in me because I was afraid that nobody would ever want me. And this is the part of the story that for some reason I don't really ever tell. It's not that I mind to tell anything, as you know. I'll tell my business, yours, I tell Dave if I wasn't married to him, I couldn't even preach. I tell his stuff all the time, And so I married this first guy that came along, and he said he loved me. Neither one of us knew what love was. He had probably more problems than me, if that was possible. And, people with problems very often marry other people that are all messed up. And so he was a car salesman, and back then, I don't know if they still do this or not, but if somebody bought a car and they had one like they wanted in another state, they would pay somebody from there to drive that car to where the person was. I don't know now if they just truck everything around, but he was going to drive a car to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he was going to, yay! And then we were going to live there, and he was going to work as a car salesman there. So we drove this car to Albuquerque, and after 30 days, he just didn't come home one night. We were actually living in a motel, and he just didn't come home. Just left me there. 18, left in Albuquerque, no money. What am I going to do now? So I didn't want to call my dad and ask for help because I knew what that would mean. And so I finally found a friend that sent me $75 to buy a bus ticket and had to leave most of what I had, which really wasn't anything anyway, and came back home. Well, I was just dumb, and so every time he would come back and tell me he was sorry, I'd take him back. Come on, we got any other dumb women in here? Every time. Come on. I can't even tell you how many times I did that. He'd come back, oh, I love you, I missed you so much, I was so wrong, and I was in a bar the other night, and I heard him playing this song, and it reminded me of you, and I realized how much I missed you, and I would just, because I was so desperate for anybody to love me. Come on, desperate people do goofy stuff. And so I'd take him back again. Well, then the next trip we made was to California, Oakland, California. Anybody here from Oakland? Okay. Well, so we lived with some car salesman guy, friend of his out there for about 2 weeks. Next thing I know, he disappears again. Just disappears again. Now I'm out in Oakland, California. I'm 18 in a few months now, I guess. And so I got a job, and I lived in a one-room apartment motel type thing, and I'd walk to work and walk back, walk to work and walk back, and finally got another bus ticket and came back home, left all my stuff out there. And when I mean came back home, every time I came back, I'd have to go live with somebody that I knew. Well, so finally, toward the end of our 5-year, I can't call it a marriage because it didn't even remotely consider that, but toward the end of the 5 years that we were married, I got pregnant, Had my son David, who's sitting down here tonight with my lovely granddaughter and his lovely wife, and my lovely grandson's running around here somewhere. And I named him David, which was not that guy's name, but it was the name of the guy that God had for me. Come on, God's got somebody for you. Don't mess it up. You don't have to take a detour. And so, while I was pregnant, I want you to get this, while I was pregnant, he left me and lived with another woman 2 blocks down the street from where we lived. And every morning when I would go to work, I'd see his car parked in front of her house, and he was telling everybody that the baby wasn't his. So when I was like as pregnant as you could be, I was over 9 months. I had to quit work. They didn't even want me there anymore. I didn't have anywhere to go. Home was just not an option for me. Didn't have anywhere to go. So my hairdresser took me in and let me live with her and her mom until I had the baby. Of course, when I was in the hospital and had the baby, he came back again. Oh, I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I've been so dumb. And of course, you know, silly me, I took him back again. Sometimes I can't believe I was ever that dumb, but I was. And so when we left the hospital with the baby, we had nowhere to live. So he called a woman that was a Christian woman that used to be married to one of his brothers. I still remember her name was Carol. She was a kind woman. And she took us in, and we lived with her for a few weeks. And the next thing I know, he's off with another woman again. So, you know, so the point is, can you imagine? Now here I am now. Can you imagine? Could you imagine, by looking at me, is there any evidence at all that I ever had that kind of a life? Is there any evidence? No, none at all. You know what? I got up, I made up my bed, and I went on with life.